Okay, so providing you stay awake through this presentation, you should be able to identify pertinent regulatory updates and navigate select IRB operations at the end of this. What I will talk to you about today is the activities that's been going on in our office last year. We have a lot of new staff, so I will tell you who they are, and then we'll talk a little bit about the initiatives for this year, 2019. So, you keep us busy. We have about 4,000 active protocols in our system. That includes anything from full review, Convened IRB protocols to expedited and exempt protocols. We have 6 committees that we manage, 4 medical institutional review boards, 1 non-medical, and then a radioactive drug research committee that meets as necessary. You have kept us hopping with roughly 10,000 protocol-related reviews. That's modification, it's unanticipated problems, it's adverse events, what have you. We've staffed about 75 IRB meetings. Medical IRBs meet every 3 weeks, non-medical once a month. So that adds up to quite a bit. Our office as a whole has presented 128 presentations last year, ranging from research misconduct to reliance to just general IRB presentations. Belinda and her group, who are the educational specialists in our office, they have recorded 3,900 completions of this CITI, Human Subjects Protection training. So, we have new staff. Our office keeps getting younger and younger. I'm not sure if that's me getting older or older, but they are really young. So we have, I'm not sure if everyone's here now, but Lori Miller has joined us, and she is, Lori, are you in here? She is up here in the corner. Lori is helping out with non-medical IRB review. We have Sam Bell, I see Sam over here. He's assisting with protocol review, expedited review, and he's also going to be helping us with quality assurance improvement. Sandra Lambert, yes, over here. She's the quality assurance person, and Jackie Williams over here. She's an administrative assistant. She helps Ben and Suzanne in our office manage IRB meetings. And then Holly Holiday, I don't think Holly's here, but she helps me, keeps us straight with budget and our calendar and such. So we're really happy they're here. And now you have a face sort of go with those names if you need anything. As far as protocol management, all you know that this past year has kind of been challenging, so because you had to import everything into IRB and it was a pain, and we've heard all about it, but we hope that now it's going to get better. We almost have everyone in the system. Judy Cool has been diligent with educating people, holding, training, various trainings. She's trained the IRB members. She's trying to get everybody somewhat comfortable with the system. So we really want the protocols to be managed from cradle to grave, meaning that the people that are in charge of the protocol, they follow it all the way through from inception to when it closes out. That's been a little bit difficult this year because IRB automatically assigns protocol as they come in through the door. So we're hoping once they're all in and we can get everybody reoriented, we will be cradle to grave again, okay? So that way you'll have a better review and people will understand your protocols and what's going on. So currently we have 7 staff that manage Convened IRB review protocols. We have 4 that do expedited review and 2 to 3 people, depending on what's coming through the door, that do exempt review protocols. This may change over the year because the regulations are changing. Belinda's going to talk to you about changes. So depending on what volume that's there, because there are going to be exempt categories that before you had to go through expedited review, now you can go through exempt review with the benefit that you don't have to complete continuation review or annual review. So people might be tempted to go that route. So we may need to increase personnel to review those protocols. Expedited review is if you come in this year with a new protocol, then you won't have, for a lot of those protocols, unless you're FDA regulated or it's a clinical trial, you don't have continuation review. You will have an administrative review, that's 5 questions versus, you know, the traditional 40. So that's going to keep our office sort of a little bit flexible just to see where we get our business. We have a couple of people that do HIPAA review. They are also going to be tasked with doing limited review because some of the new exempt categories, they require a limited review, and that's basically a confidentiality, privacy review. We have a couple of people that are managing single library review, any reliance that we do with other universities or other universities relying on us. And then we have a couple of staff that are doing quality assurance and improvement. And you'll notice in that area that we're sort of trying to do what Pam, who's in charge of this, calls wellness checks. We may go out within the first 6 months of a study just to see how you're doing. Is there anything we can help you with as far as paperwork that you need to comply with, or IRB recommendations, or what have you. So Belinda in our office put on an informed consent workshop this year. She had help with Ada Susovitz from CCTS. It was very popular. They offered it several times and it was completely booked within, you know, just hours of it coming out. It basically was, you know, a lot of the ORS staff simulated patients, which they greatly enjoyed. And then coordinators and whoever participated would practice human informed consent, and Belinda and Ada taught them, you know, things to think about when you're approaching a potential subject. So that was really good, and we're proud that we got the award for this initiative. All right, so this year, we're going to be continuing to implement the new rule. We're going to try and have as much education as we can. Now, the federal government who put out this rule have not been very forthcoming with guidance. So we are sort of, you know, we're going through the darkness trying to find our way on how to interpret this. We're doing as well as we can, but throughout the year they'll probably come out with guidance, so we'll have to make some tweaks. So be patient with us, please. All of the vice presidents for research units are going through an external review. That means that all the offices, our office, OSPA, PDO, Research Information Services, we all have to put together a pretty big portfolio so that when the external people coming from, you know, outside universities come in and look at our research program, you know, they get an idea of what is going on. I don't know if they'll talk to any of you when they come in, but I guess it is possible. Jessica and Joe Brown in our office, they're continuing the single IRB reliance work that they're doing. We foresee in 2020, when it's not only NIH who's demanding this, but anyone can go for single IRB review for multidisciplinary protocols. So that's probably going to increase workload, and we again may have to rearrange staff just a bit to meet those requirements. Like I said, quality assurance and improvement will continue. There will be 4 calls, and then we'll do these little wellness checks. So don't panic if you hear from us. It's not that you're doing bad. We just want to check on it. We are going up for reaccreditation again this year with the Association for Accreditation for Human Research Protection Programs. That's AHRP. It's a sort of a big undertaking. We get reaccredited every 5 years. So you have to put the application together a year ahead of time, and so it's due in June. And we're working on it right now, and then the auditors come in, I would say late fall, early January. And they will be interested in us, or IRB, and you, investigator and research staff. I don't know if you've been through this before. You know that we usually contact you. We get a list of protocols closer to time when they're coming, and we usually try and get a hold of you and give you a heads up and all throughout the fall. We should be giving a lot of educational sessions, because this year, you know, it's a little bit different. It's not just reaccreditation, it's reaccreditation under a whole new revised common rule. So there are things that they expect us to know that, you know, we're as new as you are at this particular point, but we'll go out there and educate you, and you should be fine, we hope. But anyway, so they look at the organization and the IRB and the investigator. So a standards, basically, they expect you, so let's say, for instance, they want us to have an avenue for research participants to ask questions or comments, or if they have complaints. So that would be a standard. So an element would be, how are we meeting that? So you know that we have a 1-800 number in the informed consent forms. You have the PI contact information in the consent forms. On the ORA website, we have a section where you can file any kind of complaint, right? So those are the sort of things that we'll have to go through and make sure are met, and that you know, because if they ask you, so what do you do if a research participant complains, then your reference is the informed consent form or a website. You know, that's as far down as they'll probably dig into this. But anyway, it'll be a big undertaking. I'm hoping that we'll go through that just fine. That's all I have, and now I would like to introduce Belinda Smith, who's our education coordinator.
Thanks, Helen. All right, guys. Happy Valentine's Day. You have new regulations. We waited. It was actually published in the Federal Register in 2017. 2 years, 2 delays. Been quite some time, but now we have it. It is now implemented. And we have to talk about the status of compliance, and Helen alluded to this. You know, on one hand, I think that we're ahead of the curve. On the other hand, I think it's still a work in progress. And one thing that we did do in advance, as you know, we talked about this at this meeting last year, we went ahead and implemented a lot of the informed consent requirements that didn't conflict with the old rule. So we've done FAQs, developed templates, learned lessons, revised templates. We've done the education, the workshops. We've developed tools that you can now use to QC your informed consent forms process. So after this time, if I asked you up here and I said just some concepts like reasonable person, is that familiar? A few of you, some of you maybe. I know you. Key information, heard that one? Yeah, okay, good. So we're ahead of a lot of institutions in some ways. The other thing though is with any new regulation, you really learn those nuances when you start trying to apply them. And Helen mentioned there's areas that are open for interpretation. What we're trying to do is we're having little think tanks. We are getting together with our IRB leadership and working to develop some consensus. So we have some consistency in our determinations, but then still have a little bit of flexibility so that, you know, if we do need to have some exceptions, case by case basis, and apply within the context of what the research is. We are doing this with very little guidance. They've just started releasing some FAQs. There is a plethora of regulatory guidance they've promised that should be coming soon, we hope. So keep in mind, as Helen said, changes could occur, particularly if we, if you know, it is their guidance is different than how we've interpreted. So we'll continue to work with it. Another thing to look for in the future is in regard to FDA's harmonization with the common rule. So, how many of you all are doing FDA regulated studies? I know some of you. Okay, a good bit. So, at this point, already you're complying with the common rule and you're complying with FDA's version of the common rule. So, no change. It's the way it always has been. We just apply both. And where it is more stringent in one way, you just apply the most stringent or the most protective for human subjects. Okay? So that's really not changing. But we do expect to see more coming out from the FDA where they are going to be adopting some of the changes with the common rule. If you got approval, so it's based on approval date. If your study was approved after the 21st of January, then you are under the new rule. If you have existing protocols that were approved prior to that, you are under what we call the pre-2019. So it'll be designated in EIRB as pre-2019. And you are grandfathered in, you don't have to change a thing. You can continue your protocol through its completion, okay, without making any changes. And it will designate this. So in your EIRB ribbon, you're going to see pre-2019. If you imported your study for paper, you're going to see even the old number, the old IRB number. And if you're FDA regulated, you should see that FDA regulation notification there too. Okay. And these are important cues, not only for you, but also for the system, so that it presents to you the information or the categories for the appropriate rule, be it the old rule, the new rule, or FDA. Okay. So I'll give you an example. So say you have an expedited review protocol. For the old rule, you have continuing review, right? If FDA, you are still going to have continuing review because they've not changed this rule yet. But under the new rule for an expedited protocol, there is no more continuation review. You will have an abbreviated check-in. It's called an abbreviated administrative annual review. So it'll basically be a check-in, what's the status, answer 4 questions, do you need a new stamp on your consent form, and you're good to go. Right? So that's just one example, but that's how the branching logic will work in EIRB, so that it presents to you what should be presented based on your protocol. As far as the new rule, we're just sharing limited time, so I just picked out a couple of areas to speak to you about that I thought might fit best with this particular group in clinical research. So we'll talk a little about secondary research options for you now under the new rule and post-new. So starting with secondary research. First of all, what is it? And for this, it's using information or material or specimens that have been collected for some other purpose. Okay, so the purpose could be somebody else's research. It could be an existing repository, or it could be a non-research activity, any one of those. What it is not is getting information directly from an individual, okay? Or even if it's a secondary activity like clinical, say you're getting a specimen, but you want to tweak how that specimen is obtained for research purposes, then it's kind of leaked over into a primary research activity. So sometimes protocols are so complex when they come in, we really are teasing out which of these activities might be secondary, primary, so we know which rules to apply. And this is the rules we use. We follow that same framework. ASU's presented this to you all for years. It should be familiar to you. The first thing we're going to do is decide whether that activity is even human research that needs IRB review. Does it meet the definition of research? Is it a human subject? Okay. And then if it does, which review is appropriate? Okay, which is least burdensome for low-risk types of research. And I can tell you that for secondary research, it could fit any one of these steps. Okay. So if you want to start out in the beginning and decide, do I even need IRB review for this? Okay, get some specimens, or I'm getting some secondary data. This is your guideline to go to. Okay? So it includes an NIH decision chart. It's based on, has FAQs about specimens and so forth, like using fresh tissue, or what if I want to do genomics. It has a lot of good information. And it's more than just answering the question, is it de-identified? Because there is definitely a misconception that that question alone is all you need to ask. If that was the only question, then this chart over here would be mighty short, right? It would be, is this de-identified? Yes, no. And you'd be finished. So use the full guidance and use the chart. And then if it does need review, your next step is, might it be exempt? Could it qualify for exempt review? And for that level, Joe's going to talk more about this, but Category 4 has new options under the new rule for secondary research. The thing about it is, some of these options have limitations. So say, for instance, you want to build a robust repository of some sort that you might want to share. You may want to have some identifiers to go back and look at things later on. You may even want to collect some things directly from a research subject or a patient. In those cases, these exemptions may not be your best bet. You may want to go expedited or full review. Anytime you're establishing one of these, you'll be asked to justify why, because they take a lot of work and there's a lot of existing ones in place already. And get informed consent for unspecified future use and shared. Okay, we've got guidance for you on registries, we've got guidance for you on setting up specimen banks, the infrastructure needed, what's the role of an honest broker, okay? Avoiding self-imposed limitations or restrictions so that you can get the best utility out of it. So rather than saying, we're only going to study this, or we're going to throw it away in 2 years, get the utility out of it. And then in the back end, whenever we get a request, can we use this material that's on the shelf for some secondary research? The IRB has to go back and look at that informed consent. Is your use consistent with what these folks agreed to? So in those situations, we want to make sure that you are addressing that. And if, for instance, you have a lot of tiered options, like where you offer, do you want us to use your specimen just for cancer research or for any research, or do you allow us to use genetics? Keep in mind, you have to track and utilize that material according to those folks' wishes. The new element, though, that the new rule requires in your informed consent is going to help with this. And what it says is it gives information to your subject to say whether or not the material will be de-identified, used, and shared in the future without their additional consent. Okay, so that really expands the utility of secondary research. So if we kind of stick with that format, it can, I think it would certainly foster discovery. All right, my next topic is kind of strange. It's posting clinical consent forms. And the impetus in the preamble to the common rule, the new common rule says they want to improve consent forms through transparency and accountability. So I guess if you post a consent form that is excellent, it might serve as a model for others. If you put a 40-pager on there with no white space and all text, I don't know if maybe we'll have these little emoticons and those. I'm not sure what will happen. But this is a narrow scope on who this applies to. It only applies to federally funded research, first of all. It's a one-time post. Okay? And the consent form has to have been used in enrolling patients or participants. It be posted on either clinicaltrials.gov or regulations.gov after enrollment and recruitment is complete. So this isn't for recruitment, it isn't to make changes in the consent form. This is after the fact. Sean would like, what? I know. And we are all kind of like, what? And be posted no later than 60 days after the last study visit on a subject as required by the protocol. Now that has no, does not jive with anything the IRB does with you, continuing review or anything else. It could be that last subject happened in another site on a multi-site study and we would not know. So we feel like you're kind of on your own a little bit with this. One suggestion was if you have someone responsible for your clinicaltrials.gov registration, when you click it over to complete it, that might be your trigger to upload this consent form. So that's a suggestion. Also, use your clinical trial administrator. I think Emily's here, right, somewhere? Over here, okay? She's not in our office, she's in sponsored projects, and there are so many requirements with this posting and results, and if you want to publish from the journal articles, and now this, I would use her services. So definitely shout out for her. New common rule, I just touched on a couple of areas, but we have a new website that has all common rule resources. If you want, we've been doing lots of presentations in small groups. We're happy to go out and provide those for you. And the last thing is we're going to be coming to your neighborhood. So you've heard about the new office hours. We want to, make ourselves available in your neck of the woods. We'll alternate between med center and campus on a monthly basis. We'll see how this goes. We'll see if we have some people walk in. But it's basically like bring your own protocol. If you're struggling a little bit, especially say for instance students or first time researchers, bring those over. We'll sit down. We'll be there to work with you. So watch the website. We will put the dates and times and locations out. And Cassandra Lambert that you met earlier back here is in charge of getting their scheduling. So if you have a question or you want her to have some things available in advance, just let her know. But you don't have to RSVP, it's just come right up. All right, there's not any questions on just this section. I'm going to bring Joe Brown up, who's going to go further into our exempt categories.
Good afternoon, my name is Joe Brown. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the 2019 exempt changes. So as most of you are probably familiar, Ada Sue gave lots of presentations on the exempt. She took about an hour and a half to go over the exempt changes. I have 10 minutes. So I can't go over everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to hit the highlights. I'm going to go over stuff. I'll try to give you an example of each category as well. At the end of my presentation, I actually have a guidance document that talks about all the changes, not the ones I just mentioned today. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started. So these are the major exempt changes for 2019. They added a new review called limited review. So basically, in IRB, there's a form called a limited review form. There are certain research categories you use it for, category 2 and 3. I'll go over that a little more detail later on. They also added a new benign behavior intervention category for exempt category 3. They allow prospective data for chart reviews for exempt category 4. And they added 2 new categories, 7 and 8, which will not be used at the University of Kentucky. So let's start off with exempt category 1. And this is research in established or commonly accepted educational settings that involve normal education practices. We see a lot of this in the medical as well as the non-medical environment. Usually for this, we see a pre-test, an education, and a post-test. So the changes for exempt category 1, now these are changes, they actually, for exempt category 1, they added some restrictions. So these are the new restrictions that must be considered when submitting an exempt category 1 protocol. Education practices that are not likely to adversely impact students' opportunity to learn. And the second one is the assessment of educators who provide instruction. So here's an example of research not eligible for exempt category 1. Researcher could not rate an instructor's teaching method and report their findings to the instructor's superior. So let's go to exempt category 2. Exempt category 2 is commonly known as the survey category. We see a lot of research in survey with it, but it also includes other information as well. This research includes interaction, educational tests, survey, or public observations. The exempt category 2 changes. They added 3 new subcategories. The activities cannot include interventions. They added the limited review for category 2 III. And also, if you're using minors, there's a lot of, this is where I would use, there's a lot. If you use, it's very difficult to use minors for exempt category 2. So usually for survey, in the past, they had where you would do a survey research and accidental disclosure, the results would not be damaging to the subject. They still have that. They also added a category called 2 III. An example is here, right here, where an investigator is actually conducting survey research with adult subjects. They're collecting sensitive information with identifiers. So what would happen for category 2 III, the PI, the investigator would submit an exempt application, and they would complete a limited review form, and they would attach it to the IRB application. The IRB is going to review the form and the and the research description and determine there are adequate provisions to protect the privacy of subjects and maintain the confidentiality of data. The third category is a new category. It's called benign behavior intervention. And we've only seen one of these categories in their office so far. I'm not familiar with this regulation, so we'll have to read part of the slide on this one. Benign behavior interventions are interventions that are brief in duration, painless, harmless, not physically invasive, not likely to have a significant adverse lasting impact. It does not include interventions that are offensive or embarrassing. Interventions are done only in adults, and there are no medical interventions, which means you probably would not see this in the medical environment, but if you're doing behavioral social science research, you would probably see this category. As I mentioned earlier, this is a brand new category. The old category had to do with public elected officials. We got rid of that. There are 3 subcategories. It also has a limited review category as well. Give you an example, we had one of these recently. We had an investigator who was submitting an IRB application, and he used an eye tracking monitor to see how subjects respond to question scenarios. And this type of protocol, the PI actually had subjects complete these minor questions and scenarios, and it met the criteria for exempt category 3 because they were not physically invasive, they didn't have a significant adverse effect, and it was brief in duration, and the monitoring only lasted 10 minutes. The next category is exempt category 4, chart reviews for secondary research. We see a lot of this for medical environment. Some of the changes, which are rather significant, you can have identifiers now for exempt category 4. There is a prospective data permitted under certain circumstances, and there's 4 subcategories. In the past, we had exempt category 4. In the old rule, you would do a retrospective chart review. You could not have identifiers. Now you can have identifiers, and there is a prospective component. And let me give you an example here. And this is for exempt category 4 triple I. All right. So this is a chart review with the retrospective and prospective data collection. The retrospective means all the data is in existence prior to IRB submission, and the prospective data is data generated after IRB approval. In order to meet the category for 4 triple I, the data collection is only for secondary data, and Belinda's already talked about secondary data, and the data is only used by the investigator. The data is not shared with others, and the data is only used for this project. So for this example, for category 4 triple I, this means if you were establishing a repository and you were going to share the results, you would not use this you would not submit an exempt application, you would submit an expedited. You would use this if you had a lot of students doing secondary research, doing a chart review, prospecting the data, they could submit this under the new exempt research. But there's also 2 other categories I'll mention real quickly. An exempt category 5, which is rarely used at the University of Kentucky. If you have a study which you think meets the category for exempt category 5, please give our office a call. We'll go over it with you. There's also a category of category 6, which is taste testing. We receive very little of this information, but if you do have a taste testing protocol, please give our office a call. We don't see very many of those, but if you do, just give us a call. As I mentioned earlier, I can't go over everything, so here's a guidance document that addresses all the exempt changes. This document right here is really used by IRB members when conducting exempt review, but it's very useful for investigators as well. Now, I went over a lot of stuff, so if you have questions, we have an exempt dream team. The dream team members are myself, and then Jenny Smith. Are you here, Jenny? Jenny's back there. And Craig. Craig, are you here? Craig's over there. Craig will usually answer questions regarding non-medical, behavioral social science, and then Jenny will probably do medical, and I'll do both. And one more thing is that Judy Cool is our ERB manager, and the exempt applications in the ERB are updated to reflect these changes. And as soon as we receive guidance from HRP, we will update the applications and we will notify you as well. Okay, and that is it. And it's now time for Jessica to talk about Reliance. She has a very exciting presentation, so I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thank you, Joe. And as Joe Brown would say, they save the best for last. We'll see on those assessments you do. So my name is Jessica Williams. I'm here to talk about the new horizons, the new frontier of IRB review, Reliance, and the 5 W's and the how of this process. I just transitioned to the Reliance Manager role in the Office of Research Integrity. So what is IRB Reliance? I think it's important to first know the definitions. I think everybody, if you asked one person in this room, what is a relying IRB, and asked the second person, the definitions would probably be very different. So a relying IRB or organization is relying on the review of or has ceded the review to an external IRB. Can be for one study or it can be for a set of studies. And then this is also known as deferring IRB review. So if you hear defer, that means you're giving IRB review and oversight to another institution. The reviewing IRB is referred to as the IRB of record. And that IRB is what provides the ethical research, the ethical review of the research, and the oversight of that study. Another term you'll hear a lot is authorization agreement or reliance agreement. This identifies and describes the respective authorities, roles, responsibilities, and really just the expectations of what is going to happen in that reliance relationship between the relying IRB or institution and the reviewing IRB. So who is involved in the process? It may surprise you, but there are a lot of different individuals and organizations and even departments on campus that are involved. You've got federal regulatory authorities that can include FDA, DOD, lots of different organizations. Principal investigators, so that's both the relying PI and the reviewing IRB PI or the lead PI. Research study staff. You have to have the infrastructure if you want to take on several different sites. You have to have the infrastructure to manage those sites as the lead institution. Accrediting agencies like AHRP that Helen mentioned. Institutional IRB offices, so the Office of Research Integrity, we take on additional roles that sometimes are behind the scenes even when we rely on another IRB. And IRB members are still a big part of this process. Their roles are changing as the landscape changes for Reliance. However, they're still a big part of the process. So why is this process important? I cannot stress enough that when you're using an external IRB, or if you say you want to go and use Word, or you have to, you're required to, we still need to know about that. You still have to go through a Reliance registration request process, and that has to be reviewed and approved through several different layers of our organization. The PI alone, unfortunately, cannot make the decision whether we can rely on another institution or not, or whether we can be the IRB of record. So that decision is made by, ultimately, the Vice President for Research in consultation with ORR Reliance staff, UK IRB, and legal counsel sometimes. So we'll talk about what needs to happen and what the responsibilities for the various layers are. So the PI responsibilities, PI has to, if you're a researcher here, you do have to comply with both the reviewing IRB and the relying IRB. So even if Word is reviewing the study, there are still local context reviews that we have to do here. And that requires us knowing about it and also effective communication with the IRB. So ancillary reviews like HIPAA, radiation, a lot of state reporting requirements, those have to be handled here locally. So we've also got the IRB office HRPP responsibilities. So it's really imperative that IRB staff at both the reviewing and the relying institutions work together to handle these reliance requests and issues that may come up, because compliance oversight, template consent language, all of these things are responsibilities of both the reviewing and relying institutions and HRPP offices. There are also institutional oversight responsibilities. So conflict of interest management has to be taken into consideration. Contract management. So we've got, between legal, vice president for research, sponsored projects administration, and even proposal development office. A lot of times our office has to work in conjunction with these other offices. For example, if UK is getting a sub-award, if we're getting a sub-award and for a larger institution that's a lead IRB and we're relying on their review, we still have to work with sponsored project staff to make sure that that reliance agreement is there, it has to be in place, and also that, that the protocol is approved by the reviewing IRB. So there are lots of local things that we have to take into consideration here. So it's good just to talk to us ahead of time. So when is single IRB reliance mandatory? In January of 2018, NIH single IRB policy went into effect, and that was mainly to reduce administrative burden and to eliminate duplicative IRB review. This applies to NIH multi-funded research. So I'm sure everybody here knows what multi-site research is. But it's basically where the same protocol is going to happen at several different sites. And it's usually non-exempt studies. The revised common rule, which Helen also mentioned, the single IRB mandate will be effective as of January 20th of 2020. And they define this a little differently than the NIH single IRB policy. This is all domestic research subject to the common rule, which involves more than one institution. And I know that cooperative studies are also mentioned in this single IRB mandate. So just keep in mind that the definitions are a little bit different from NIH to OHRP's definition in the revised rule. Also keep in mind that the NIH single IRB policy only applies to NIH-sponsored multi-site protocols that are submitted after January of last year. If UK is the IRB of record or the reviewing IRB, eventually, this is not happening at the moment, however, eventually we may need to work with, the PI may need to work with ORI and sponsored projects or other departments to potentially budget direct costs for IRB review. So if we're the reviewing IRB for 5 or 6 different sites, we need to budget direct costs for that, for the additional workload that we'll have. Also, new in 2019, this is coming soon, we're still finalizing this. Researchers will be able to submit a shell protocol in EIRB. So if you're relying on an outside institution, we would still like to have that shell protocol in EIRB. Again, this is not finalized yet, so please don't go and submit a bunch of non-UK protocols into EIRB. When you're entering that, when this does become finalized, it should only be done after you consult with us. So just remember that, just to communicate with us first. How to conquer reliance. So these are some lessons that we've learned along the way throughout this several year evolution of reliance. Be sure to start the process early. Please do not come to us 2 days before you want to start enrolling people and say, I've got to get this authorization agreement now, because it's probably not going to happen. We want you to start as early as possible so that we won't delay you. We don't want to impede research. Please talk to our Reliance staff. Joe Brown, who was here before me, he is also a member of the Reliance team, and we're the Reliance Dream Team, I guess. So you can contact him or I, and we should be able to help you. Always complete the Reliance registration request form and submit it to us. That's available online. I'll have the website on the last slide here. Be familiar with sponsor and reviewing IRB expectations and PI responsibilities. So you may want to talk to your sponsor or the reviewing IRB about, what do you expect from us, even though we are not at your institution. Some more lessons learned. Just be sure to contact us prior to having any agreements or contact with other institutions, because if they call us, we have no idea what they're talking about if you haven't already registered with us. So it just helps to expedite that process. Please do not begin research involving other sites, or if somebody else is reviewing IRB, please don't do that before letting us know. There are compliance issues with that, so just be aware to let us know. As for guidance and checklists, we have a lot of guidance and checklists on the single IRB webpage, but those are still not, a lot of them are still not finalized, so some of them are not on the website, and we have those sort of on our own computers, so we can send those to you. And if you're unsure about anything, say one of our patients is enrolled and there's an incident and there's a reviewing IRB, an external IRB, and you're not sure who to report that to or how to report it, just contact us. We're happy to help you with that. So at the bottom of this page is the Single IRB Reliance webpage. It's on the main ORI page, but it's at the top. So we're a little bit more prominent on the main ORI page now, which is great. If you have questions, you can always email irbreliance@uky.edu. If you like to talk on the phone, I love to talk on the phone. Call me anytime. You could also call Joe Brown. He loves to talk on the phone. So, yeah, any way of communication is great for us. And that's all for me.